a little bit of a delay between when we hit the button and we get the go and when we are actually live. Folks, welcome to Leadership Uncertain. And I've just forgotten our subtitle for a moment. Adventures in Confusion, Love, something else uncertain, and dignity. So
Power. You
power.
keep
Thank
forgetting
you. There we
power.
go.
Right, exactly. That's
So,
right.
and it's funny that I should forget power because today we decided to talk about your brain is a hybrid vehicle. Uh, and we're going to talk about how to keep the engine running. And I'll explain that in a moment. Hugh, the first thing that comes to my mind around this is stuff that I've been talking about this week that I'll get to in a minute.
Mm,
You like how I keep postponing the getting to this and the getting to that.
mm.
The other thing that comes to my mind is what you put me through after you picked me up from the airport.
Fortunately, you won't be sharing any video today, but I'm sure your audience would be
Yeah.
thoroughly entertained
So
by us both.
I come up with thoughts about what we're going to talk about, as does Hugh. Today, I was the first one to propose a thought, and I've told Hugh very little about what's on my mind. You've now essentially heard it all as well. Uh, Hugh, if you'll indulge me in a couple of silly questions, have you ever driven a hybrid vehicle?
Uh, I've driven an all-electric vehicle
Okay, yeah,
once,
different.
but I don't know that I've ever driven a hybrid. No.
So when a hybrid vehicle comes to a stop, the gas powered motor stops. It
Okay.
cuts out, right? Because part of the reason for having a hybrid vehicle is to conserve fuel, and
Okay.
the electric engine, the electric motor rather, um, makes keeping the engine running unnecessary.
Okay.
So the reason that this is what comes up for me as an analogy, and this is an analogy I've given to two different groups this week, is that our brains are about 2% of our body weight,
Okay.
and they consume about 20% of our calories. And in a world where we evolved with scarce calories that we really needed to preserve, our brains are evolved to shut down when they're not needed. Thus we sleep, and thus when we tell ourselves that a problem cannot be solved, our brains say, "Thanks for letting me know," and they shut off, just like your hybrid car when you come to a stop sign.
I would offer that our brain shut off in lots of cases, and that is a very good example of
Yeah.
one. Also shuts off when we say the word but.
Mm.
So a rule in our house is if you wish to stifle your own intelligence, please use the word but. It's an invitation to stop thinking. So if
Yes.
we and one of the beautiful things about being in my household is that intelligence is generally prized. And so if you want to offend someone, just invite them to be dumber than they are,
Well,
and it's usually weaponized that way.
intelligence is prized in my family as well, which is why it was particularly impactful when any one of us would not even try some food that my grandmother had
Mm,
put in front of us. She would sing a little song that went like this:
hmm.
"Aaron's unintelligent."
Wow,
Intelligent.
that is a different level of savage.
So I'll come. It is. So I'll come back to the but, and I'll suggest that that at least in many cases, and I'm not sure whether I think yet in all cases, I think in many cases, what you are pointing at, the word but shuts off your brain, is the same instance as the one that I've said, where we've decided this problem is unsolvable.
Yes,
Right? I'd
there's no more
like,
room in the universe. Let's move on to
I,
solving things
yeah,
that we have a chance at.
exactly right. I'd
Yes.
like to go to Mexico, but I can't afford it right now.
And the conversation and the creativity and all the processes that can conspire to deliver a trip to Mexico
Yes,
are
done.
abandoned, are
Yes.
suspended indefinitely.
And so, you were in a training that we put on where we suggested that everybody substitute the word and for
Mhm.
but. And in that particular circumstance, it was really about influencing other people and creating environments where the collective keeps moving, and we're not slamming on the brakes and hitting this negotiation with a brick wall. What we didn't do in that particular training is get into this next level of this next level of sophistication, which is that it's true when we're negotiating with ourselves as well.
Hmm.
I'd like to go to Mexico, and I can't afford it right now, leaves all of those creative engines running.
And I can't afford it right now. And right.
Indeed.
The because then you begin. So here's where it supercharges for me. I don't know if, well, you had the you provided such wonderfully nuanced and non-positive feedback on my book that I wrote all of what, 13 or 14 years ago now. And we explore in that book the power of positioning and asking questions,
Mm-hmm.
because where statements fail, questions inspire.
Mm.
And it's not about answering the questions, because the beautiful thing is an answer is just another statement. To me, if you had to ask me, where is life?
Mm.
Everything that is dead is a statement. Everything that is alive is a question.
Mm.
So, and there's nothing wrong with dead things. Dead things are very useful. We
Yeah.
eat dead things.
Yeah.
Our skin is dead. It protects us. Like we have a very, very good
Yeah.
use for the known.
My desk is dead.
Your desk, thank goodness for the dead wood that's in your desk.
Yeah.
Like all of that is very, very useful. So please don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to create a moral tinge on that which is inanimate. I am simply saying chances are the answers to our most exciting opportunities, challenges, focuses, they're not to be found in that which is dead. And I will substitute a word that's more philosophical, because I think of that which is dead as also that which is known.
Mm. Mm.
So if you are in a body of knowledge and you are very comfortable in that body of knowledge, you are like the table. You can be very useful,
It's done.
but just recognize that you are pulling from an encyclopedia of value that is fixed.
So let me illustrate what I believe I understand you to be saying.
Sure.
If I believe that the world is flat, then
Mhm.
I do not venture past its edge. If I am uncertain, or if I start to believe that maybe the world is round, then I learn that I can circumnavigate the globe.
Well, so let's take that as far as it really does get to go, because the other thing we don't want to do, remember, we live in a probabilistic universe, right?
Yes.
It's a most useful place to live. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's just very useful to live here.
Yeah.
Lothar Schaefer writes in a really good book called Infinite Potential. He's a nuclear chemist that writes on the links between nuclear and molecular physics and spirituality. It's a fantastic work. He's a
Okay.
professor at some place in the South.
It's
So
it's like a book directly aimed at Hugh Stewart, who, if
uh,
you don't know, folks,
that's funny.
is a nuclear engineer and
No, former,
for
former, former.
once a nuclear engineer, always a nuclear engineer.
No, no, the technology evolves enough, and we make some fun jokes. So in nuclear engineering, they will tease and say, we're really not that smart. We just make crap work. The real rock stars are either your rocket scientists or your nuclear physicists, because those guys have to be smart enough. We just take what they do, approximate some numbers, and build crap.
All right. Well,
You know,
this isn't the point of today's
I
conversation, so I
understand.
won't argue
I'm
with you.
taking you
Although
down
I,
these rabbit
although
holes.
I am arguing with you.
Keep going. Keep going. Finish your analogy. I won't bother you anymore.
I thought it was your turn. I thought we
Okay.
were in your turn. I thought I had interrupted you.
Well, now I'm
What?
completely
Oh
disoriented.
no, yeah, I interrupted you about the book. I said this book is directly aimed at Hugh Stewart.
So I was just going to say that, what he does is he makes the comment that all creativity, all that which is to unfold comes from what's called zero point field information. So effectively, there is a field of the unmanifested from which the impulses of existence effectively emerge into being, into existence. And these things work for suns, they work for black holes, they work for galaxies, they work for stars, they work for coffee, right? It's all the same kind of stuff. And if you can buy into the idea, and this is, what I like about his theory is that it elegantly brings into convergence things like M theory, and if you like, your casual string theory, cocktail conversation, it all kind of fits in. Where instead of a hard universe in which you get what you see, you realize instead that things are a little bit more flexible. And if you have a fundamentally good working understanding of nuclear physics, you recognize that the world is not nearly as hard as we would believe it to be. Instead, there is literally in every moment, well, first of all, if you take the trip with me and recognize that every moment, everything that has ever been and that is right now is literally vibrating into existence. It's just bubbling into existence, right? And exploding into existence every second of the day. If you can hang on to that particular concept, then it becomes not too much of a stretch to then realize that every single moment that you have to draw breath, to spend time, to create business, to create value, to go after supporting customers, to do the things that you do in your regular life, that moment is pregnant with possibility. And that is something that whether you choose to see it or not, it becomes infinitely helpful to just simply remember when you can, because that possibility is where it gets exciting. Because so much of our problems, so many of our frustrations, so many of the things that we give up on in life have to do with the fact that we have somehow forgotten that the possibility for there to be a different outcome
Mm.
has vanished.
And I think there is a habit. We all have habit that today is right. This is the way it
Hmm.
is a real habit. I am whatever
Insert.
overweight. I am not as bright as I would like to be. I am poor. All of these things are habits of thought. It's just the way it is another way of saying this problem cannot be solved.
Well, and let's be a little bit more. I'm sorry to do this to you, my friend, but I'm going to be more radical than that to you. Let's imagine that we live on a plane in which we don't we don't have a dyadic relationship with everything. So you just framed a really good statement, a statement that most people find very useful. I look at my life, I see these elements, I see my vision, and things are reduced. There's a point I need to come back to. Please remind me to talk about monstrous acts of reductionism. We'll talk
Ooh,
about that.
okay.
Yes, but we won't we
Write
won't
that down.
lose focus just yet. We're going to get back to that. In the meantime, let's just explore this dyadic relationship with moving objects in your world. Okay? So, if you're sitting if you're sitting in a room and you create a play in this room, and you've now created a cast, and you've cast everything in the room as being either an obstacle or a help to your getting to the door.
Mm.
then the world becomes a very different place, and the potential neutrality and the potential strategic byproducts of everything that can happen begin to fade away
Mm.
as your entire model of the universe then becomes a protracted experience of getting to the door. And I
So
say that to you because you said something that was very revealing. You said, can this problem be solved? Well, here's some stupid ideas for you. What if it's not a problem?
so to that end, right, is the great innovators of the world are problem finders.
Mm,
If I go back to our anti-Semite Henry Ford, he said if I'd asked the people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse.
sure.
He reframed the problem. Just the way it is how expensive the internal combustion engine and the automobile have to be, because they have to be assembled piece by piece. One person walks through the whole process. There's no assembly line. And so he redefined the problem of how do poor people get, or not ridiculously affluent people get places faster,
Mm,
in terms of how do we reframe what it means to assemble an automobile.
yes.
And to your point of the things that I am right now defining as an obstacle between me and the door, as these are, you didn't quite put it like this.
Help or
These
hurt.
help, right? These
Help or
help.
hurt.
Um,
Or hurt. Or hurt. That's the other part of the dyad.
yeah. So I'm gonna rewind and come back to connecting here with you to the beginning, where the hybrid engine,
Mm,
the internal combustion engine component of a hybrid car, stops when you come to a stop, stops at the stop sign to
mhm.
conserve fuel.
Yes.
And yesterday and today, I was working with a couple of different groups on how do you cultivate an innovation and problem solving culture. And the third principle in our cycle, I'm sorry, I'm hurting your brain. I'll reconnect it. The third principle we call at the S Works, we call it the Pete Carroll principle,
Okay.
because Pete Carroll, the coach of the Seahawks, asks the question all the time, no matter what the circumstances, how do we win from here?
Mm,
And so you can be down 24 points with a minute left in the game, and he's asking the question, how do we win from here? The answer is not score 25 points. That's not going to happen in 1 minute in a football game. The answer is, how do we redefine what it means to win right from here? So we were working with a specific company uh, a number of years ago, well before COVID, I recall, and they had hired us to help them. We don't know the answer. We just helped them think through the question.
mm,
For them, the problem was, we have reached a plateau in our uh, revenue possibilities. We are not earning more. We want to be growing, and we have not been able to figure out how to do that.
mm,
And in the room with a room full of executives, one of the things that we learned is that their job, their business model is that they take clients uh, from D to F. So they go D, E, F. That's what they do. They take clients who are trying to get from D to F, and
got
they
it.
do it just fine every time. And one of the things that was burning cycles for them was clients who were coming in at B and saying, "Take me to F." And so that was frustrating for them. They were complaining. The executives were complaining about it. Their employees, the front people on the front lines, were complaining about it. And by the time we left, they had decided to take
No more bees.
not no more Bs. They had decided to take the Bs
And put them to
and
C's.
require that they recognize themselves as Bs
C's.
and charge to go from B to D, so that they could then charge to go from D
D
to
to
F.
F. Got it.
And they were looking at all these folks who were coming in as Bs as a drag on their ability to earn revenue, when in fact it was an opportunity to get to the door.
Yes. I love it. I love it. I love it. And we circle back to have you recognize that I don't know. I've gotten to a pretty perverse place in my career where the UGG, oh, that's cool.
Uh-huh.
The struggle, like I had there's a favorite person of mine in the whole world. His name is Roy Williams. He runs, he used to run, I guess he's a emeritus professor now in a non-traditional business school in the middle of the desert in Austin, Texas called the Wizard Academy.
I want to go to a
I
Wizard
used to
Academy.
I used to go there every 6 months to writing classes and to things that he does out there, and it's just fantastic. He used to say that the mother of creativity is constraint. You're not going to truly break through until you have constraint. Now, I will tell you a story about this. So a lot of the folks you teach at the one of the customers you teach for, they have to, in their course alongside what you're teaching, they actually have to get two certifications, at least two. There are like five of them, but there are two that matter a lot. One of them is a certification for implementation. Another is a certification for accounting. And they usually will do both. And they have lots and lots of time during this educational honeymoon period to just really focus. I took your course because I wasn't going to let anybody in my organization go through the education that I hadn't done. But I don't have the benefit of a nice honeymoon period. So I was taking class and I was trying to do work and try to get project work done and show up on time and be away and all that other stuff. Anyway, the point is that I did not get the certifications I was supposed to because I never had the time to really take and study and to take the test. But I did get it set up in the system, and it lasted like I think 6 months. A full year later, we wrote to the folks at Intact and said, "Hey, can you give us the educational credentials? It seems like mine has expired." And all I thought they were going to do was reactivate it so that I could then uh, take it whenever I wanted. But what the lady was kind enough to do was not only activate it, but then give me a 30-day deadline to get
Mm,
both certifications completed.
mm.
Which, remember, I had not done this thing in almost 2 years,
Right.
and now I have 30 days. And I was about to write her back and say, I can't do this. I don't have the physical bandwidth to make this happen. And then I looked at the calendar and it got even worse. The last 2 weeks of the deadline, I was supposed to be traveling and not even in the country and not having access to any technology to be able to pull this off. So not only did I not have 30 days, I actually had 2 weeks. And then when I looked at my calendar, it was filled with meetings and sales calls and all these other things. So I actually had 4 days in which, in those 4 days, there were effectively 7 hours of study time that I could take. And between the two bodies of work, it was about 600 pages that I had to effectively read again. And what ended up happening was that I wasted time in the first 3 days. And then on the Saturday before the test, I read 350 pages in 4 hours and then took the test. And I got three wrong out of 75. And now I'm a certified Intact implementation specialist. But it got worse. I had an employee basically, she was chiding me that I didn't necessarily get my accounting certification. So the next day, I read the 174 pages that it took to get that part of it understood, and then took the test and passed that one
Mm.
as well. And so in that weekend, got two certifications because that was the gift of constraint.
And this is this. I love this story of constraint, and it points to another quote from Henry Ford that I put in the description of this episode. Uh, Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Well, let's take that even further. You are always right. So let's be really careful about what you're willing to die on the vine being right about. Whenever you're talking, and I mean all the time, you are always right. You may not be accurate, We're not saying you're accurate.
What's the distinction you're making there?
So accuracy has to do with the alignment of your information with the reality that is about you. Rightness has to do with the feeling of certainty with which you are speaking your
Mm.
words. And understanding that difference can save your life.
So as
Can
long
also,
as you're, by your definition, then as long as you are being honest, you are right, though you may not be accurate.
as long as you are being certain. So this also creates the space for the sociopaths among us, right? So they may be very confident in their lives, but the sociopaths that I've come to appreciate and know, they are incredibly certain about the lies they're telling. There is no cognitive disconnect between the lie and the certainty.
So it's interesting, speaking of this kind of certainty and whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. These groups that I was working with this week on helping them cultivate an innovation and problem solving culture, what I learned after I left from the leader of their group was that after I left, they started talking about all that's very well and good, and we're too busy,
Yes, my
and our
favorite.
teams and our teams are too busy,
We're too
and
busy to make money and save ourselves. Awesome.
and I remember very clearly, and I even remember telling them about the time in my life when I did not have time to get gas. And
Okay.
that really did not work out well for me.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's a good
Yeah.
one.
Right.
Well,
It takes time to stop and fuel up the car.
mhm.
It turns out it takes a lot more time to run out of gas on a bridge and
Well,
wait for AAA.
isn't that the truth? And you raise a good point. So this takes us back to our analogy in the room. Because one of the things that happens when you have a dyadic relationship with objects in your life, because we are hyper focused on the goals we're trying to achieve, that we miss the neutrality of the objects in the room. And let's take that further. We miss the neutrality of the events.
Mm.
So, yes,
Yes.
yes,
Right.
we need to make money today. Yes, we need to make sales happen. Yes, we need to get those projects done on time. And those remain neutral events. Because one of the things I know is personally, if this is a really great topic to be talking about, especially for me this week, because we are facing lots of aspirational goals. The year's about to end. We are in a clutch situation where we can really do some amazing things in the next 16 days before the year ends, and we could fail.
Mm.
And we have lots of strategic objectives, and we've got lots of irons in the fire for development, and it could all go sideways. And I have a responsibility to get people to perform, or we may have to lay off folks.
Yeah.
All of that is real. And guess what? Not the most important thing happening right now.
Hmm.
You know what the most important thing that's happening in my life right now, Aaron?
I hope to hell it's this conversation.
And you would be correct. You
Yes,
know me too well. So that's
because
the point.
it is the most important thing happening in your life right now, because it is the only thing happening in your life right now. Lots
And
of things are happening that you care about,
sure.
right? I mean, my wife and daughter are out there breathing and hearts are beating, and who else? Who knows what else each of them is doing right now?
Exactly. Yes.
It's not happening in my life right now.
Right. In your
Uh,
span of conscious activity. Yes.
and I don't know. I'm a quote machine apparently today. This time I'm not going back to Henry Ford. This time I'm going to Hamlet, who said exactly what you've been saying. There is nothing either good nor bad, but thinking makes it so.
And this is where we have to be very careful. So now we're not going to be woo-woo spiritualists today. That's not the point of the exercise. However, it is very helpful when I can present to my team, hey, this is the reality of what we are up against. It is
Yes.
neither good nor bad. These are numbers on a sheet. They do not tell us who we are. Because let me tell you what happens when we conflate the meaning of something with what it is. The meaning is personal. The what it is just an event in the universe. We justify practical evil. What do I mean? We have to get this done today. We have to get this done today can be inspirational. So we take action, live into our character, create the environment of teamwork, of camaraderie, of engagement, of focus, of kindness, of, of flexibility, of sacrifice, or we have to get this done today. And it
Mm.
becomes a place of tyranny, of rationalization, of compromised values,
Yeah.
where we're
Yes.
cutting corners, where we're cheating things, and both can start from the same potential sense of urgency, but only one of them can transcend the predisposition to descend into disconnection
Mm.
from our highest opportunity to engage and create culture that reinforces our value. I don't want to do a project on time if it sacrifices the nature of my culture at my company. No
Mhm.
project is worth that.
Yes. Right.
And so, where can we renegotiate as necessary to do this and be congruent with everything else that keeps us together? Because we can either get there in the car that is fully functional and happy, or we can get there in a car that is literally falling apart and the wheels are, coming apart and the bumpers falling off and all the other things are going wrong with it.
People
And we
are bleeding.
still, and people are bleeding and complaining and they're about to die. And we are at the same location, but with very different inspiration. And so, one of the things I think I shared with you, my favorite class in college was a doctoral class called continuum mechanics. And one of the principles in continuum mechanics is called the principle of potential.
Mm.
And basically, what it says is behind any energy flowing in the universe is the difference between two potentials at play. Here's the example: water flows from high elevation to low elevation, heat flows from high temperature to low temperature, radiation, high temperature to low radiation, wind, high pressure to low pressure. You pick the energy transfer method, and behind it is always something that is going from a high place of potential to a low place of potential. Anger is the disparate division between high expectation and low assessment.
Mm.
All the same rules apply. Hunger happens because there is high, it's a difference between uh, low potential, low existence of the energy source with a high uh, external need. And so the bridge is made. And so the energy flows, and anything that happens in the universe happens because fundamental background impulses are causing them to act. There has to be a divide between two states for anything to happen. So if you're focused on the thing happening and you're not concerned about preserving the inspiration, the background ether around which that activity occurs, you're only playing half the game. And I will submit to you that the capacity to resolve issues, the capacity to solve problems, the ability to transcend challenges that are in the moment, that are simply here to have you evolve, all of that allows you to be able to connect to the difference in potential. What is the culture of your workplace? It is the culture of your workplace that causes effective things to happen.
Mm.
And so you have to be very careful when we approach some of these to not just work on the external symptoms, but also be very focused on how these things come to be and how they get to be maintained.
So somehow, Hugh, what comes up for me, one of the many things that come up for me as you're talking about these things, the flow of high potential to low potential, or high pressure to low pressure, all that
Mhm.
kind of flow brings me back to, I think, maybe the one of the very first things that I said, which was that part of my thinking around bringing us to this idea, your brain is like a hybrid vehicle.
Mm.
It stops to preserve fuel whenever you've decided this problem cannot be solved. I said one of the things that brought me to this thinking was what you put me through when uh, when you picked me up from the airport last week. Um, so why don't you spend a moment talking about why you didn't just take me to my destination once you'd picked me up from the airport?
No, I wanted to have, so for everybody who is not in on the joke, I happen to be a salsa and bachata instructor, and it's one of the things that, one of the random skills that have come across in my life. And as when Aaron came in, I picked him up from the airport, and instead of driving an hour 40 minutes to wherever his destination was, decided to take him to a restaurant that had music playing, and I decided to teach him bachata because he tried to convince me many months before that he didn't know how to dance and he didn't have any rhythm. And I wanted to have him be proven wrong on both counts. So what we did was we started by having him listen to his favorite songs in the car on the drive to the restaurant, and having him literally count the music to show him that he actually had rhythm he didn't think he had.
And importantly, I failed before you had me play my favorite song. I failed to effectively
Mhm.
find the rhythm in something rhythmically more complex and less familiar to me.
Let me help you with that statement, because even that is a little harsh. I simply introduced a diagnostic song in
Yes.
which to just simply assess where you were. It was
Yes.
not a test
And
because
no.
there
And
were
you
no
ass
expectations.
and you assessed by determining my that I had failed.
Yes, we determined that
Absolutely.
that was not yet the
Yes.
level for which you were comfortable, and we just had to level set to find that level. That's
and
all that
and
was.
what's I think what's important in this, for this conversation is, uh I used to believe that I have no rhythm, right?
Okay?
And what is true, and what my wife, a musician, has demonstrated to me, as well, is that I do have a deficit.
Okay?
Right? Compared to the average person, I have a deficit in my current capacity to feel and hear the rhythm, uh,
Of
in
certain
in
music, for
in
sure.
music, and especially in certain music, if it doesn't smash me over the head.
Sure.
And, uh, over the years, we've been driving along, and I will tap her leg to the rhythm, and I'll emphasize what I believe is the one, and I've gotten considerably better.
Mm.
So you you encountered me with the benefit of my having let go the idea I have no rhythm,
Okay?
um, and some level of learning, and it required my saying, "Okay, I have no rhythm," and I could not argue myself out of that. And what the Pete Carroll principle that we talked about earlier suggests, right? There's what Pete Carroll says, which I won't repeat right now. What it suggests is that you adopt a posture
Mhm.
that this problem can be solved.
Yes.
Which is really different from believing that it can be solved, because my rational brain was never going to accept that I could learn rhythm.
And we never actually took you on that way.
Right. My pre-rational brain doesn't mind the paradox of I have no rhythm and can't learn rhythm, and also yes, I can.
Yes.
And so that adoption of a posture that this problem can be solved, or it doesn't have to be this way, there are other options. You don't have to believe it in order to gain benefit from adopting that as a mental, attitudinal posture.
Well, so let's go a little further to that. And I will say one of the best skills I have learned. So I had the benefit of really experimenting with what we're talking about here. I was able to learn how to be. Remember, I started off my salsa and bachata career hating the music. I totally hated it. Now here we are. the you know competitions and performances and going all over the country and all over the state, doing all these things with this music that I supposedly hate. And now it's one of the things that bonds me with my daughter,
Mm.
and that we will have memories that we will never forget as long as we are human around this music that supposedly I had a hate it, don't know it, don't understand it, can't dance to it, and doesn't even like it. So anyway, all of that's just able to be changed. And I guess
Mm.
what I've learned is
Mm.
sometimes you have more tools in your toolkit than just rationally thinking.
Mm.
Because what we were able to do with you is okay, we realized that you liked the songs you liked, and we were able to pick out beats in them. And salsa was not your style, just wasn't for the day and the time and the
Yeah,
context that we
too
had.
difficult.
It was just not the level that was appropriate for the day. Not saying that it's not possible, just not
Yes.
today.
Yes.
And we instead ratcheted it to a place where you found connection with bachata, and you were on it, and we were able to count, and we were able to be there, and we were able to have you be proficient in just a few minutes. And it's
And,
beautiful.
and it was beautiful. It was, I appreciated it. And what I love in your saying, not for today, is it points to this, I forget whose TED talk I watched where she talked about the power of yet,
Mm,
right? I was not able to pick out the rhythm in the salsa music
yes,
yet.
yes.
And the fact is that when I met my wife 20 years ago, uh, it was true then that I would not have been able to pick out yet at that point the rhythm in the bachata music, in which I I kind of astonished myself eventually with my ability to not just pick out where are the beats, but where is the one unconsciously. I'm still kind of astonished by it.
Well, so let's tell the people what you were able to do with that. So the next level of the exercise, this whole thing took maybe about an hour 40 minutes, is he was able to then link the one he was able to find to the steps that he was supposed to take. And then we actually, as my prize, sent his wife a video of him actually performing the moves and turning and getting to his position where he was supposed to be with the counts. And what that was for me is one of the gifts I can give my friends is the ability to show them just how unlimited they can be.
And you know what I did, Hugh, that none of that shocked me. None of
Mm,
that even quite surprised me. Although it did surprise me later to learn from you how quickly I picked that up compared to some other people.
hmm
The thing that astonished me was in making that video when I lost it, because there was a moment or two where I lost it. What astonished me was that I was able to get it back.
Yes.
That's the stunner for me in the whole experience. Um, and so again, it's kind of this adopting this posture. This problem can be solved, even if I believe it can't. To hold that posture and see what comes of it. Maybe I will find that I can't solve it. And if I don't hold that posture, I am certain to find that it will not be solved. If
Well,
I
and one of the really great practices, and this is a paradox because there's a friend of mine out there that quotes me, and I said this 15 years ago, and it's still true. It's just there's nuance because we get old and we get wiser, right? There's nuance. So I used to say, it is actually, as a leader, it is more appropriate to be certain than to be right,
Mm,
because people get confidence from certainty. No matter how
mhm.
right you are, if you don't occupy a sense of purpose and you're not willing to take action, it won't matter. Rightness without certainty is uselessness. Certainty without rightness is recklessness. The what I've come to appreciate, however, is that as I create vision, I have to be certain in its inspiration. While paradoxically, I get to be completely comfortable in a universe of growing uncertainty
Mm,
and do both because I stay fresh and interesting because I am consistently uncertain. And that consistency in the uncertainty is what allows me things like total behavioral flexibility
mhm,
because you don't know who you're going to get in 5 minutes. I don't know what the universe is going to require of me to be in this moment.
mm,
Do I need to be a dude that's ready to talk or listen or preach or draw or dance or code?
mm,
I have to learn SQL. I have to learn a language. I'm
mm,
taking Spanish at night. Whatever the universe is requiring of me, here I am. I am simply open, ready to understand, ready to learn, ready to absorb, and I don't know very much. And the less I know and the less I purport to know, the wiser, the cleaner, the more the more inspiring, the more amazing the world unfolds itself to be.
uh, what you're talking about, Hugh, brings me to the incredible creative power that commitment brings to us as
Mm.
well. And I think about I'm reminded of a time when I can't remember how old this young boy was. We'll call him Alex, though that wasn't his name. He was something like 2 years old, and we're in kind of a crowded room, an event in someone's home, and there's one of those giant urns that you plug into the wall, and all you've got to do to get the hot water out is to press the little black lever. And somebody took their eyes off of Alex, and he wandered over to it, and as a 2-year old will do, he got curious about this thing that clearly is a lever, and depressed the lever and scalded his hand
Oh no.
uh, with this scorching hot water. And I'm a man of quick action. So I scooped him up and I ran him over to the kitchen sink, and I turned on the cold water, and I tried to run cold water over it, and he would not have it, as you might imagine, screaming, shrieking, resisting. Folks were around trying to gently coax him into allowing his hand to be put under cold water. His mom was there trying to convince him to put his hand under cold water. And Alex knew me, so I wasn't a total stranger, though I was not like his mom. The last thing on earth that I would have expected me to do in the face of a 2-year-old screaming in pain and fear would be to get right up in his face and shout at him.
Hmm.
And I was so determined, right? I was so committed to saving him from further injury by allowing his flesh to continue to cook itself.
Mm.
And nothing else was working. All of this probably still in the first 20 or 30 seconds.
Just stun him and get it done.
I just shouted at him, Alex, do you trust me? And he said, and I said, then put your hand in the water. And his
Mm.
hand went in the water. And that reminds me of, you talked about the creative freedom that comes of constraint, and I agree wholeheartedly.
Mm.
And then there's also the prisons that we put ourselves
Sure.
including the one that goes, and I've heard this so many times, that's not my personality.
Oh, that's a whole other show. That's not my personality. Well, so, the beautiful thing, so, I run a mental test on myself. Anytime I find myself into a bit of a rut, I always run the Mogadishu test. And I think I've shared it with you before.
You have.
So, this is where if you find yourself convincing yourself that the world is a certain way or you're a certain way, the Mogadishu test says that if you were to be dropped into Mogadishu tomorrow with no clothes, no food, and no money, would you hold on to the same beliefs
Mhm.
that you have today in order to get yourself fed and get yourself out? Would you be and act as you do right now?
Right. Yeah.
So
Really puts this whole personality thing to
if
the
you
test.
want to test whether or not this personality business is really there, I had the benefit of taking a class many years ago, way in my early 20s, that presented personality as a series and systems of deeply ingrained habitual responses to stimuli.
Yeah.
And and again, it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, it's how useful is it if you simply act that way,
Yeah.
right? So recognizing that I don't have to be limited by what my very deeply ingrained habit. Now it's hard to overcome them at times, but then again, I don't know. When I was hanging out with you, it was cool to get the waitress to come dance with us. Because why not? Because I'm hanging out with my friend. Why can't I do that? Because normally I would be totally embarrassed about doing that. But because I don't know, why not? We can be mischievous.
It you remind me of the power. Now you remind me of the power of play, right? So, and which brings me back into that innovation and problem solving cycle,
Mhm.
right? Where play is one of these principles, the one of the principles that leads to this uh, virtuous cycle. And I remember the day when I was an acting teacher, when one of my students said, "I can't do that. That's not my personality," and I was
Mhm.
kind of like, you're in an acting class, right?" They and I just recognized kind of the biochemical prohibition that they were under. They really
Sure.
could not. They really could not. The fear of shame and the
Mm.
fear of ostracism really did, I think, physically prohibit this person from doing what they thought would be embarrassing.
Okay.
And I had created a game that I call Tail. That is kind of like hide and seek, except that everybody's hiding and everybody's seeking at the exact same time across some portion of the college campus where I was teaching. And the idea is, anybody who's in the game, if I see them, if I see you, I can start taking notes surreptitiously. All right, at 12:05, Hugh bends down to tie his shoe, and I log tail time on you, which at the end of the game is going to be essentially worth points. And I watched this person who, I don't remember what it was that they were unwilling to do. It was something, to my mind, pretty simple, not very embarrassing at all.
Sure.
I watched them as I'm watching my students play this game out on the quad in the campus in front of lots of people walking around.
Mhm.
I watched them see somebody coming their direction who was playing the game, hadn't seen them yet. They did not want to be seen. They looked over their shoulder, saw the security guard looking straight at them, shrugged, and did a dive roll over some low
Oh,
shrubs,
bushes and hedges
right?
and trying to get hidden.
And so what was, yes, my personality will not permit me to do this very minor thing.
Sure.
When it came to play, all bets are off. My personality doesn't matter. I am committed, and it's commitment that makes the difference between an actor that we are captivated by and one that we call a ham.
Well, and the other part of that, and I guess there are a couple different ways to come at that point, and then we'll wrap up with your final thoughts. I guess what comes up for me is, if not me, then who? So I ask this all the time. Who do I have to be? I have to talk in front of a CEO. I have to make a sale that's, a couple $100,000 or whatever. Who do I have to be? Who do I have to be today in order to converge with this person such that they see value and I can help them? So if it's not the Hugh that is afraid to talk to people or the Hugh that is afraid to do certain things in his life, who else is available
Right.
that I can step into their shoes
I
and
love
just
that.
and be them being doing the stuff that normally would terrify me.
Yeah.
And what's neat is I spend a fair amount of time each week being terrified of something. Every week, being terrified of something, whether it's at the gym, whether it's in class, whether it's teaching, talking, presenting, trying to take on something that I thought I couldn't do last week, and the like. And and so I guess as we wrap up for today, I guess the only other thing I wanted to say that I don't know that got necessarily communicated, the more we struggle with a problem, the further we get from solving it. Part of one of the things that has really worked for me for a long time is I really don't have problems. I don't. I don't. What I have are really awesome stepping stones and really great training partners that show up in the form of really awesome challenges that get to be resolved with my friends. And those friends happen to be on my payroll. Let's go get it. So
Sounds
for
good.
me, the way we even think about these things, it's not, even if it's existential. And the name of the game is, if we lose this, we declare bankruptcy and we got to fire people and like my financial life is wrecked. That in itself remains a neutral event.
Mm. It's just a thing that happened.
Just a thing. Well, you know what? I've had the benefit of having lost everything. That, so when you lose everything and you on the verge of, you've been evicted from your corporate space and you're living out of your car, that's happened. You know what? You realize, okay, we're just swinging the bat now.
Hmm.
If the worst that could possibly happen happened and I'm still breathing and I've still been able to make it back, then what are we worried about here? Yeah, it's embarrassing. Get over it. No worries. Here we are.
Yes, right, right.
What are your final thoughts?
Hmm. I mean, I just keep coming back to the power of purpose.
Mm,
I'm doing a different show on Friday about how to make your company really authentic.
mm,
Part of what I'm going to suggest is that people redefine authenticity away from uh, away from the idea that authenticity is about following your impulses, as if that's what authentic means. Um, that it really is about making your commitments and your values. To your earlier point, authenticity is about making your behavior line up with those things,
I agree.
not line up with the story you tell yourself. One of those stories you tell yourself is, "This is my personality. This problem can't be solved. This is just the way it is."
Mm,
Those are my thoughts.
I appreciate you
And
sharing
it
those with
looks
me.
like we'll have to wait for another day to find out about monstrous acts of reductionism.
That's okay. I
All
will not. You just have to say those words to me, and I will go off on you.
right. Hugh, as always, a pleasure. Those of you who have been with us, uh, also a pleasure. Bye,